Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Welcome to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian, your host, and this time we're going to be exploring the process of reintegration. As we have been all, and some of us are still in the midst of this pandemic, COVID-19, quarantine, what comes afterwards? And in New Zealand, we are in a sense privileged that we have been able to defeat the virus or not allow the virus to take hold as much as in other countries. And now we are, in a sense, back into our lives, into working, into kids going to school, into businesses operating, all of the businesses and not just the essential ones. And of course, during all of this time that we have been at home, and of course, everyone a completely different circumstance and experience, but for a lot of us, this was a time of going in, of slowing down, of connecting both with ourselves and the people in our lives differently. So perhaps you had more time to connect with your kids at home. Sometimes that is a challenge, but you were able to have your kids 24/7. You were able to perhaps spend more time on Skype or Zoom calls or just WhatsApp, talking with your family, whether they are somewhere in a completely different place around the world, or they are in the same city as you, but you weren't able to connect with them in person. And perhaps you had more time for that. Perhaps you had time to take on yoga and meditation and learning something online, or perhaps none of that. And your lockdown experience was very chaotic. What this has brought is that it changed things. So whatever was your normal before, and whatever was the normal in your city or your country, that is not longer the case. And when we look back, and this is something that I talk a lot about, is that normal that a lot of us have been eager to get back to, that wasn't working. And for me, that it's not a normal that is worthwhile getting back to. So how can we reimagine things? How can we create a new normal? And at the same time, making sure that we take this as a process for each of us to reintegrate into society and work on a different pace. So I've been talking with a lot of people that already here in New Zealand, in this very short amount of time that things started to reopen, that they are super stressed and overwhelmed. And this has to do with the fact that they were thrown back into the way that things were done before. But now, most of these individuals were able to see a different way of living, a different pace, a different time, different methodology. They were able to connect more. And that stress that is coming up has to do with the fact that this is a shock. Just like when we travel and there's that culture shock, this is another shock. And when we travel, if you have traveled somewhere and you get that culture shock, actually the biggest shock that we get is when we go back to our country, when we go back to that which seems familiar, but that doesn't feel the same. Because guess what? It's not the same. You are not the same. You have changed and grown and developed whilst you were away traveling. People at home, even though they might seem the same, time has gone past, so they are different. But the dynamics that occur once we go back seem similar, but we don't fit in with that anymore. So reverse culture shock is actually way more important, more prevalent than culture shock. Because when we're going somewhere, we are aware that that's going to be different. When we went into lockdown, we knew this is a completely different scenario. Being at home most of the time, unless you're an essential worker, if you're a parent, having your kids with you all the time, changing your habits of how you consume and buy and cook and any other thing that you do at home. And now we are being asked to go back to work, to offices, after having learned how to operate Zoom and all of these online meetings, and perhaps got a taste of not working all of the time, not working perhaps on the timetable that you're usually used to, not having to go to the office and, in a sense, spend half an hour or 1 hour on traffic or at a bus or a train, however you go to work. So, how can we learn to take what came up during lockdown, those things that we realize about ourselves and about the ways that we want to live in this world, and how can we take that into the new that seems kind of familiar, but it's not? And of course, everybody's circumstances are going to be different. One of the biggest things is actually taking the time to go back inside and perhaps take a piece of paper and write down what were the things that you learned during lockdown or that you're learning during lockdown in terms of the ways that you want to be in the world, how you want to work, how you want to spend your time, how you want to spend your money. What are the values that you were able to dig up during this time? And how can you bring that into your everyday life? I have talked to a lot of friends that realized during this time of lockdown the amount of money that they saved because they weren't all the time buying things out. They weren't buying everyday takeout coffees. They weren't eating out. And they saved a lot of money. And are we going to go back to that? I'm not saying not doing it. I'm just saying, is that what you want to do? Are you able to go, if you work for someone or at an office, Can you talk to your employer to see if your work can be more flexible in terms of location and time? Perhaps you realize that you prefer working from home, cooking your own meal, taking breaks in a different way, perhaps doing some work later on and using the morning for yourself. Can you talk to your employer about that? If you work for yourself, can you keep on doing that? And doing practices that allows us to actually create the space that we need to reintegrate. Using meditation, yoga, going for a walk or a run, whichever is the form and shape that you need to connect with yourself, so that this doesn't come as a shock to your system. For me, one of the easiest ways to do this is just to sit and to close my eyes and to take a few deep exhales, just making sure that I'm exhaling deeply, like taking a few conscious breaths. Anytime that feels like things are going too quickly, or that you're starting to get overwhelmed or stressed out, being able to slow down and do things step by step. One of the biggest things for me and for the people that I've been working with in the last few weeks is that they feel like they are different. And some of them, because of circumstances of work, lost their jobs. Some people feel like that is no longer what they want to do. And how do we all figure out how to move on? And this is something that is not just for these times, but at these times perhaps it's a little bit more intense. I always say to people, find what you want to do. And once you understand what you want to do and what is the gift that you bring to the world, how can you make a living from that? And that's not always easy. It's not easy for everyone to change their life if that is needed, to quit their jobs and to start something new, because a lot of us have responsibilities, a lot of us have a lot of fears and doubts. So how can we create the space that is needed to move on with things? If you're still working and you feel like this is no longer the space for you, this doesn't serve you as much anymore, can you see yourself doing something different? Or are you going to be worried about money and about that safety net, that safety net that work provides you? Even though at this moment everything is up in the air, having a regular income perhaps at this time makes you less anxious than if you had another unknown, that is, where is money going to come in from? If you lost your job, Now you have time. You might not have that security of having an income, but you have the time. This was forced into you. So seeing this as a blessing. Of course, there's going to be challenges, but can you see this as a blessing? A time for you to reassess what you want to do with your life, who you want to be, how you want to show up. Do you need to search for other work, which is challenging because now there's less and less opportunities? Can you start something for yourself? Do you have the opportunity to be open and ask for support from others? Ask for help. For anyone that is going through changes during this time, and this is everyone, I encourage you to open up to the people in your life, to tell them what you're experiencing, to be vulnerable, to ask for help and support, because we all need that. This is why finding a community, whether that is with your family, your close friends, or a wider community, a tribe that can be there to support and help one another, is so important. And we are all going through these changes. So trying to get out of our own way, thinking that others are going to judge us, not going to point fingers or say something really difficult if we open up and say that we need help. Most times when we do that, people will embrace that and will embrace us. And the power of community is so strong that a lot can happen from there. So allow yourself to be vulnerable, to open up to others, to ask for help in your own time, in your own way. And perhaps if you're in a position that you can be there for others, reach out to your friends, to your family. Ask them, how can you be of support? Because there's many that need our support now. So how can we help? So during this time of reintegration, taking things slowly, using the time to realize the direction that we are going to go to. How do we want our lives to be? How do we want the world to be? There's a need for systems to change. Because once again, as I mentioned before, the normal that was before wasn't working. It was broken, both for our lives and health and for the planet. And some of us had a lot worse than others. So what can be the new future? And the new future is now already. And with conscious action, we focus a lot on the individuals and how can we be the change that we want to see in the world. So based on your own values, your own personal values, not anybody else's values, what are the things that you need to do to make sure that you are living through your values, knowing what you stand for and supporting that? There's a lot of people that are supporting local, If that is something that you care about, support local. If you care about sustainability practices or regenerative practices, support those that are actually doing that. Support those with ethical practices. See if instead of buying everything like you have been or we have all been in society, we can slow that down. We can change the way that we have been dealing with that. How can we be there for one another, changing the way that we are operating every single day as individuals and turning into community? I'm really curious to see what comes up for everyone. Where do we go to now? I'm exploring this myself. I'm exploring this with the people in the community, with my friends, with my clients. Where to now? And understanding that it's a process. So being kind with yourself, being kind with others, making sure that we understand that this is a reintegration process. Being compassionate with ourselves, compassionate with others, compassionate with Mother Earth. Knowing that as these times have shown us for most of the population of the world, we are one. And we can come together. Not doing exactly the same, not being the same, but united. How can we move forward with that in mind? So, my invitation for you is to share with us in the comments, to share with us how are you going through these times of reintegration or still through lockdown? How are you changing your ways? And what do you envision for the future? I encourage you to share this in the comments, and I encourage you to share this with your friends, your family, your community. Where to now? So thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next week.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.